Hey there, it's Dr. Kayla, and today's episode is a bit different from our typical science backed, holistic women's health strategies. Though, don't worry, we will definitely be implementing parts of that in today's episode. But today we're talking about traveling with young children and why that is so important to my husband and I as young parents. So, our children are ages 5, 3, and 1 at the time of this recording. And ever since our oldest was about 6 months old, it has been a priority for us to plan a trip each year. And some years it's not something huge. Some years we're not flying across the country, and other times we are. And the reason this is important to us is because before we even met each other, before we were even dating, it was something that was individually important to each of us and something that we honestly connected on as a couple when we started dating. In fact, soon after we started dating, we met up in New Orleans because we were both going there separately with friends for a football game. We both went to Ohio State and they were playing in the first college football playoffs. And we met there, and that was so much fun. And we both lived in Columbus at the time. So that's just a fun aside that travel and experiencing the world and new places has always been something that we both genuinely enjoy. So I know many other women who feel this way, and many women who aren't yet moms who have told me how inspiring it is to see us travel with our young children, because so often in today's society, we are told the opposite, that kids aren't welcome on planes or that it's not a vacation with kids, it's a trip. Like, how many times have you heard that? It's not a vacation if you take your kids, it's just a trip. And it is still a vacation when you travel with your little ones. Do you have to adjust your expectations? Absolutely. It takes a little bit more flexibility than when it's just my husband and I traveling. But I hope today's episode will inspire you that you can travel with your little ones if this is something that you enjoy like we do. And if it's something that you haven't yet stepped into, but it's something that you desire to travel, and that's perhaps not how you were raised or something that you haven't experienced, but it's what you want to give your kids. I hope that today's podcast will give you actionable insight and tips to encourage you that you can do it no matter what the narrative is that you might hear elsewhere. So, our trip this year in 2025 brought us to San Francisco, California. We live in Ohio, and this meant that we had to drive about 2 hours to get to an airport because we live in a very rural area in Midwest Ohio after previously having lived in Columbus and like super close to an international airport. But I digress. So we had to drive first 2 hours to an airport and then fly out a 5 hour flight from Cincinnati, Ohio to San Francisco, California with our littles. And we chose to take something called Breeze Airline because they had a direct flight. Now, when you are traveling with kids, if you can get a direct flight, that is a game changer. When we went to Banff, Canada with our family, with our children, we had a terrible layover in Chicago. We had missed our connecting flight. There was no other flight out. And it was like a 24-hour travel day. So anytime we can get a direct flight, we do so. There's just less variables involved. You're not worried about missing a connecting flight. You're not rushing the children through the airport. You are in control of when you arrive to that first airport destination, and then you are good to go as long as that flight hopefully takes off on time. So we had a slight delay, but otherwise it was good. Now, with Breeze Airline, what was interesting is you had to pay for a carry-on or checked luggage. And so for our family of 5, it made more sense to do one large checked bag versus each having our own individual carry-on. And so that actually made it easier once we got to the airport and checked our bags, that all we had was our personal items to take through security and through the airport. So for an 8-day trip, we packed everything for all 5 of us in one checked baggage. So that definitely required some pre-planning. When we go on these big trips, start packing like 2 weeks in advance to make sure that I have everything that we need, to make sure I'm not waiting on laundry the night before and stressed out. So I will make sure everything is freshly washed and then pull from the full array of clothing that we have on hand and pack it. And then nobody's allowed to touch that once it is packed. I put it in a place that is zipped up so our little one can't climb into it and pull stuff back out, which has happened. So I put it in a place where they can't get into it. And We reuse things. So I always plan to do laundry about halfway through the trip because when you are active on vacations like we are, we do a lot of hiking. It is almost impossible to rewear clothes. The kids get dirt on them, mud on them, food. I mean, they'll have snacks in the car. And when we get out of the car, I'm like, oh my goodness, your shirt is covered in whatever you were eating. And so just plan on rewearing items and just simply doing laundry at one of your destinations along the way. That allows for us to pack much lighter. Also, choosing similar color schemes is very helpful. So you can mix and match what you're wearing. It looks like an entirely different outfit, but it might be a different shirt and a different pair of pants. And then shoes, that makes it so much easier too, because you can just do two pairs of shoes. So we'll do our hiking shoes and then like a sandal or a flat or like a casual white tennis shoe that can be dressed up or down to wear otherwise. So that is how we pack and keep it extra light. Now, the big benefit with traveling with children is that typically they can check luggage for free when it comes to child safety devices or child carriers. So, child safety devices would be your car seats. So, we typically rent a car when we are doing these national park trips, such as we did this year to Yosemite. And when you are packing a suitcase, you put it in like a big bag. It's almost like a trash bag, but it is made of material. We get these from Amazon, and that helps protect your infant carrier device. However, it also hides what is in there. And so we buckle in diapers into the car seat and wipes so that I'm not having those big bulky items in our clothing suitcase taking up valuable space. So we had two bags of car seats. One had our infant child care seat, and that had the diapers buckled into it. And then our other bag had a 5-point harness car seat for our 3-year-old and a booster seat for our 5-year-old. And in that, I was able to put some bulkier jackets. Those are super light. We're not putting in things that are going to make it weigh like twice as much as it should and cause kind of a red flag when they are weighing it whenever you go to drop it off for free. And I just strap them in to that 5-point harness car seat. And then they're in this big bag with a drawstring at the top. You pull that up, get it all tightened up and good to go. Now, since we have pretty much double car seats so that my husband's vehicle can have some and so can mine, we were able to have our extra car seats packed, but the kids were sitting in the other set of car seats in my vehicle. So that meant that when we got to the airport, we didn't have to unbuckle the car seats from the car and package everything at the airport. So if you're like us and you have essentially two sets of car seats, that makes it easier. So when we get to the airport, my husband drops myself and two of our children off with all of the luggage. So we've got the two large bags with car seats in them. We've got our large checked luggage. And then we also had a third large bag that was like, the trash bag kind of shape. And that had our child carriers in it. So for hiking, we use those huge hiking carriers that have like a stand and are very structured and supported because that is best for your ergonomics and babies for a longer duration hiking. Those count as child carrier devices. So that would be like the same category as a stroller. So if you bring a stroller, you can also check that and just put it in one of those big bags for protection. We did that with these hiking backpacks. And so with that, since those are kind of lighter framed items, but are kind of counting at this as the same thing as a stroller, in those I put snacks. So that is where I put all of our beef jerky or our That's It fruit bars and some trail mix, and a lot of like protein bars. So quick grab and go items. I did like puffs for our little one. Puffs are huge when hiking with little ones, so just give them a little something to kind of keep them entertained as you are hiking along. Suckers, I love the Yum Earth suckers and the Beekeeper's Naturals suckers that aren't using any processed sugar or food dyes. The Beekeeper's Naturals literally uses honey, so there's some immune support benefits there. There's elderberry ones from Yum Earth, so anytime I can support their immune system, especially when we're traveling and it's with, to them, a treat, the better. So those are little tricks that I use. The suckers come into play on hikes or on travels between hikes. So we love, love, love those when we're traveling. Again, just a healthier sucker option. So you're not getting a big crash right afterwards in terms of their blood sugar levels. And then we're getting the good protein with the beef jerky. So I stuff all that into the different compartments of the hiking backpack. So my husband drops me off with all of this stuff, and my 5-year-old daughter and my, at the time, about 16-month-old son, our 1-year-old, and him and our 3-year-old went and parked the car and then took the shuttle back to the airport. So just that way we didn't have to lug our children and all of the luggage on and off the shuttle after dropping our car off in the parking lot. So he helped me bring everything in just while our car had its hazards on right outside of that drop-off area, bring it all in really quick, close to where our checked luggage gate was for our particular airline. You can see the airlines listed out as you drive in, so you just pull up to that section, bring it inside, and we just camped out there while he went and parked the car. And then when he came into the airport, he got into line for getting the bags checked. And then I hung out with all of the kids by our luggage until we got closer in line, and then we dragged everything over to him. So it's definitely a bit of a sight, but it is always so fun. And honestly, we typically get so many encouraging comments from other travelers who are like, oh my goodness, look at what you're doing. Like, you guys are super parents. And when you are in a little bit of a high stress state where you're just like, okay, I have all my kids, I have all my luggage, your head is on a swivel constantly in this situation, right? It just feels so good for people to give those little uplifting remarks. I think people can be scared to travel because they think they're going to annoy people who are traveling without kids. And I have so found the opposite to be true. People are just so encouraging and so complimentary of us taking our kids on little adventures. And so just keep that in mind. It's not as scary as it sounds. So once everything is checked, then for this particular trip, we just had a backpack. For myself, that was our diaper bag. I use that as my personal item. Technically, you can have an additional personal item in addition to a diaper bag, but I didn't want to have to carry two things because I was also baby wearing our 1-year-old. My husband had his backpack. He takes care of more of the tech stuff. So in his, he had our iPads, our itineraries, just any of that kind of logistical information or tech. And then our children, our 3-year-old and 5-year-old, each had their own backpack with some snacks in it, and then some games or any toys that were approved by me that they wanted to bring, as well as like a muslin blanket. I like to bring a few of those so that if we want to sit down on the ground and like play Uno or play a game while we're waiting, we can do that and not just be right on the floor. It's also nice for on the airplane that if they want to lay down and like have their head on something, that they're not just laying right on the leather of the seat, they can lay that blanket down. And I just always know that the same side is going down on the floor and then fold it up where that side is folded in on itself. So you're not getting those germs on the part that they'll be laying their body on or sitting on, or cuddling with, or whatever they want to use that blanket for. So on the airplane, families are typically stationed towards the back, which is honestly helpful because you're close to the restroom, which is of course always needed in a very quick manner with young children. And then you can stand and bounce your little one, especially if you're traveling with around a 1-year-old. I will say that's kind of the most challenging time to travel. The 16-month-old, like anytime around that 1.5 year mark is challenging because they want to be so mobile, but they're not they can't just walk up and down the aisle by themselves of an airplane yet, right? Our 16-month-old walks great. He even runs. I mean, he's stable, but he couldn't do that on his own on the airplane, right? That wouldn't be safe. And he wanted to. So, we're having to hold him back. And he also is not nursing around the clock anymore. He nurses at bedtime, but he wanted nothing to do with nursing in the middle of the day on an airplane at takeoff or landing. Whereas on our trip prior, when we explored the Utah Mighty 5 national parks about 7 months prior, and he was about 9 months old, he nursed at takeoff, landing. He slept right after takeoff, was awake, and then slept again closer to landing. So it was just an easier time to travel when you're closer to that like 6 to 9 month range. But once they start walking, it gets harder. So all that to say, Our littlest one had some rough moments on the plane, but eventually did give in to sleep. And again, people were nice. Like, we did not get glaring looks from people. People are understanding. There's the hum of the plane in the background, kind of that white noise. People have their headphones in. Like, I did not at all feel like all eyes were on me and my baby who was making a fuss. And again, he did give in. He finally slept because I stayed calm. If I had let myself get super riled up, babies feed off of our nervous system and our energy. And so that is important to keep in mind when you're traveling with little ones. Staying calm, staying regulated yourself is going to help your little ones stay calm and regulated too. Now, our 5-year-old and 3-year-old did great. I allow unlimited screen time on plane rides. Now, it was a 5-hour plane ride, so I did not allow it that entire time. The first 2-ish hours, they played games with each other. They looked out the window. They were just excited to be on an airplane. And then when they started getting bored, it was like, okay, you can watch a show on the iPad or play a game or whatever. We had shows pre-downloaded on the iPad through PBS Kids. You can do that for free. The airline also had where you could link to their entertainment zone and choose different shows that they had, and that was also a free service. Some airlines like Delta or American Airlines for those longer flights are going to have where you have your own personal screen on the seat back of the person in front of you, and those are nice too, where you can put something on and they can tune in for a little bit. I knew that we were going to be active, exploring, and traveling the rest of our trip. So if they were to have extra screen time on a flight, absolutely zero issue with that. When it comes time for landing, you have to put all of that stuff away anyways. And again, they were really excited to look out the window and see us land the plane. So when we got to San Francisco, we first explored the city. We were going to stay in a hotel just slightly outside of the city in a safe suburb that evening so that we didn't have to make the 3-hour drive to Yosemite after already having done a 2-hour drive in the morning and a 5-hour flight. That would just have been too much. So we explored San Francisco. We honestly enjoyed it. We went through some neat areas. I'll drop my blog post below, which will link some additional details just on like where we all went in terms of the names of the parks and things like that if you are interested, because I know a lot of people like planning their travel itinerary off of something somebody else has done with little kids that can absolutely help. So we found some neat parks, some fun eateries, and then drove out of the city, stayed in suburbia because we were very afraid of car break-ins in San Francisco for obvious reasons. They are well known for that, unfortunately. So we stayed in a safe suburb, which felt great. It was right by a Whole Foods. Literally, I could walk to the Whole Foods, which was amazing. So I got there, got everybody settled in the room. My husband started getting them ready for bed, our kids, and I went to Whole Foods and picked up apples, cheese sticks, cold meat, salami, carrots, bananas, mandarin oranges. Those are our go-tos, right? So things that, yes, need to stay cold somewhat, but also are okay and not like a very sustainable like fridge setting, right? So those were so nice. The next morning we had a 3-hour drive. And so we just were able to get in the car, take some coffee to go, and the kids had a protein bar that I had packed in those hiking carriers. And then they each had like a mandarin orange. And then as our drive got closer to lunchtime, we stopped at a park. The kids got out to play, and I was able to get out the meat and the cheese and some crackers I had also got from Whole Foods and the carrots. And we had a little picnic, and the kids burned energy, played, and then we continued our drive the rest of the way to Yosemite. So Yosemite National Park was on our bucket list. My husband had gone when he was about 5 years old, which was neat, kind of to reflect back on that he was the same age as our daughter whenever he had gone. And we checked into our resort, which was absolutely amazing. If you travel to Yosemite, Rush Creek Resort and Lodge is where we stayed. I do not get any kind of influencer affiliation or anything like that with the place. We just absolutely loved it. My husband found it, had great reviews, very family friendly. But honestly, if we were to travel just as a couple, I would enjoy staying there too. They had a spa, which I was able to do one night. They built in like kids' play areas on the side of the foothills of the mountain that it was right outside of the park, and just everything looked so natural, which was really neat. They had a saltwater pool. They were very mindful of naturally derived ingredients for the products that they used in the room in terms of like shampoo, conditioner, all of that, body lotion, and their spa. So that day, that first day, we did go into the park itself. We did do some hikes. We saw Lower Yosemite Falls. We hiked up to that. We did Bridal Veil Falls Trail. That you got hit with tons of mist, which was absolutely beautiful. Our kids thought that was so cool. And honestly, it was so much mist. You could not even see the waterfall when you got up to the viewpoint. You had to view it from further back because you were just hit with so much mist. And then we went to this cool viewing point for El Cap. So you could see people actually climbing up El Capitan, and you had to get your binoculars out to see them because they were that high and far away. Just to the naked eye, they looked like a pinpoint speck. So we had our binoculars out. We watched them scale El Cap, which was wild. And then we also at that place did kind of another lunch. There was a 3-hour time difference from Ohio to California. And so our eating schedule was a little messed up the first couple of days, where it was like biologically we were hungry kind of on the drive in because it was what typical lunchtime would be for us. But in terms of California time, it wasn't. And so we again got out our kind of snacky food of our meat, cheese, carrots, fruit, crackers, all of that, and picnicked again overlooking El Cap. And there was the rushing river from the base of Bridal Veil Falls going past us. We could see Bridal Veil Falls. It was a really neat spot. And from there, we then went to the Yosemite Valley Visitor Center. So if you are traveling with young kids, getting the Junior Ranger program is pretty neat. So it is totally free when you go to any national park. You go to the visitor center, and where their ranger is that you can ask questions about hiking trails and the weather and whatever, they can give you a Junior Ranger program booklet. And in fact, if the line's really long, I just like run up to the front. I'm like, can I just have a booklet? And they're like, oh yeah, here you go. Because if you know what you're doing, they don't have to give you the full spiel. So that's what we did. We got the booklet, and we got one for our daughter and our son this time. Our Utah trip, only our daughter did it. So our son was excited. Our 3-year-old was excited to take part too. So it has different activities in it, and it's good for them to do on the drives between your hiking trails, as well as in the evening or at dinner time. And at the end of your time at that park, when they've completed most of the things in the booklets, you turn it in, you go back to the ranger station, and you turn it in, and then they have to put their right hand up and they say the Junior Ranger pledge, and they get a little badge, like a little pin. And our kids just thought that was so cool. So highly recommend doing that. It's totally free if you go to any national park with really a kid ages like 3 to 10, honestly, even maybe like 13 would probably really enjoy that. So Bridal Veil Falls, Lower Yosemite Falls that first day. If Tioga Road had been open, we would have done that drive, but it was still closed for the season. We went the weekend before Memorial Day weekend. So it was end of May, and a lot of times those roads don't, like higher mountain roads, don't open until June in these national parks because of the amount of snowfall they still get all spring, which is wild. But I will say the week before Memorial Day was an awesome time to go because the waterfalls were raging, which was absolutely beautiful. The weather was 80, 85 degrees in the valley of Yosemite. And then as we would hike up, it would get into the 60s, which felt good because you were hot from exerting yourself on the hike. And then you would hike back down and it would feel warm again, which was great. So the next day was our first full day in Yosemite, and we rented bikes and explored El Capitan Meadow, where you could see El Cap, you could see Half Dome, which is that super famous Half Dome hiking trail that you have to get passes to hike up, which we absolutely were not doing with our little kids. We couldn't. You couldn't. There's no way. Um, and then we saw Mirror Lake. So this was a beautiful lake that reflected these different mountain faces that are super famous. And there are big boulders around it that the kids climbed on and just had a blast. And biking, you can rent bikes at Curry Village or Yosemite Village. And we got where my husband and I each rode a bike, and then there were little trailers behind us that the two boys went in one, and then my daughter went in the other that I pulled. We then got pizza at this incredible place inside Camp Curry, which was really fun. And then for the afternoon, we did the Mist Trail. Now, the Mist Trail takes you up to Vernal Falls, and again, you get absolutely pummeled with mist. Now, this hike is labeled as hard, and it is steep terrain. And so to start the hike, you're hiking along like this rushing river with not a lot of room before it like drops off, right? Just like drops off into this raging water. And so we had our 3-year-old in the pack on my husband's back. I had our 16-month-old on my back, and then my 5-year-old daughter hikes holding my hand or my husband's hand. And she knows from our prior trips, like I stay on the inside. I put one hand along the mountain wall on the inside of the trail, and I don't go to the outside where it drops off. Like she knows. So she was like well trained for this at this point. Now it is steep, and our 3-year-old is a big boy. I mean, he's around 50 pounds. Plus, my husband had a huge water jug in his pack as well. And so he started struggling and was like, let's see if you can get out and hike to our son. And he did, and he did so well. He was so enthusiastic, so excited to be hiking with us and out of the pack and like being able to exert himself too. And he listened. He, like his sister, stayed on the inside of the path. He now held my hand. My daughter walked between my husband and I kept our 16-month-old on my back because he had fallen asleep at this point. So we hike up, we get to the mist section, and you just get pummeled. It is absolutely beautiful. If you go to Yosemite, put this on your list. We then hiked up above the waterfall so you could look down on it, and it just was an absolutely incredible experience. I will drop the blog post in the show notes so you can look at pictures. It was so pretty and absolutely worth the strenuous hike up. When we got to the very top, it was able to switch our 1-year-old over to my husband's back, and we ended up making a 5-mile loop. Our 5-year-old did 100% of it. Our 3-year-old did like 90% of it. And then, of course, our 1-year-old was on our back. And kids are so resilient. As we kept going up past the falls and we kept climbing and we kept going to make this full loop, it did get long. And it was hard. And our kids did start to complain. And honestly, that's where those life lessons come into play of you can do it. I know this is tough and this is challenging and your body feels tired, but how cool was what we saw? Because when we were going through the mist section by the waterfall, they were like, this is amazing. Like they were so excited. This is the best day ever. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. But then how quickly you can kind of forget that really cool experience and focus instead on, my legs are tired, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, right? And so just being able to help them pivot their attitude, shift their mindset to, but how cool was that? And like we did this really hard thing and we got this awesome kind of reward at the end and at that summit. And so, on these hikes, there's nothing there but you. And especially as we went past the falls, we didn't really pass anybody else. And it just opened up this time for conversation with our kids, for questions, and for them to just explore and kind of take it all in. And again, it doesn't mean that it's rainbows and butterflies the entire hike. They did complain and I got tired too. But that is where resilience comes into play. And I just like to think that going through tough moments like that builds resilience and helps them see how we respond to situations when we're tired and hungry and ready to be at the end too, but how we keep going. And those are life skills that I want to instill in them. And yeah, I think that hiking really does that and just gives them this desire and this understanding for exploring the world and that there's something out there that's greater than themselves and all of that. So, in these trips, there's so much life learning that happens. And I think that's really, really cool. So, after that huge hike, we went back to the hotel. We swam in that saltwater pool. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say at this time, I was 8.5 weeks pregnant. And all of our other large trips, we planned it between pregnancies or I was in my second trimester. I was 20 weeks pregnant when we went to Banff and some other trips. And it is easier to hike at 20 weeks pregnant than it is at 8.5 weeks pregnant, if you ask me, because in that first trimester, you are so focused on protecting your body and leaning into rest. The body is naturally more fatigued and needs more rest because of all of the changes happening behind the scenes. And so I, as a holistic women's health physical therapist, was very mindful of that and did not want to overexert myself. I know that there is an increased risk of miscarriage with strenuous activity and with maximal exertion, like exercising to the point of maximal effort does increase risk of miscarriage. And so that was something I was very mindful of on this trip. And so that hike was strenuous. And afterwards, I told my husband, like, I need to have a relaxing evening. Like, we do need to take it easier the next day. And so that night, I actually went to the spa that was just down from our room, and it was so relaxing. And it is exactly what my body needed to just down regulate and to just know that, like, okay, I did have a more stressful day, but now I'm helping my body restore and recover and telling it is safe. Today was not strenuous because I was running from a bear. My life was in danger. Like, it was an adventure, and now I am safe. I am nourished. Had a really was intentional about what I ate for dinner. I had salmon for some healthy omega-3s and a variety of vegetables, just really nourished myself well, made sure I was having my electrolytes. We relaxed in the pool, which pools are so relaxing and calming for your nervous system and helpful for your lymphatic system. And so just did all of these things, which is important to point out, to not just disregard that I was in my first trimester of pregnancy, but to genuinely honor that while still doing these desired activities that we had for this trip, right? The next day, we did a drive to what's called Glacier Point for an overlook of the entire valley, which was beautiful. We did a hike to what's called Sentinel Dome, and my daughter wanted to stop about 3/4 of the way up. And I was like, that's fine. I'll stop with you. I would have loved to keep going. But again, this voice in my head was like, you're 8 weeks pregnant. Like, remember that. And so I had a snack with her and our 1-year-old. We had a beautiful view. We were 3/4 of the way up the dome. And my 3-year-old wanted to keep going with my husband to the top, which was so cool because, again, we didn't think he would do much hiking himself. And he wanted to go above and beyond. He could have stayed with me on the side of the dome, and he wanted to keep scaling up with my husband. So that was a really cool, proud moment for the two of them to summit that together. And then we took Tunnel View on the way down, which has, again, just a really cool panoramic view of the valley. And then we were able to just, again, enjoy our resort. It had so many awesome things to offer that the kids enjoyed. So we got a full afternoon there, which was really fun. They had a restaurant on site too, a really good shop with an organic, just naturally sourced things. And we just absolutely loved our stay there. So we had no problem spending an afternoon at the resort, and they did s'mores every evening, which was a nice treat. The next day, we went to Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. So these are about a 3-hour drive from where we were at in Yosemite. So Woke up, got going early in the morning, but our reasoning for going there is that they have the famous sequoia trees. And on our way out of Yosemite, we went to Mariposa Grove, which is still in Yosemite and is their largest grove of sequoia trees. And that was really neat because it was not as populated as some of the trails we would do later in the day in Sequoia. And the trees were large, but we're talking like the 16th largest in the world versus the top three that we found in Sequoia. And so they weren't as overly protected per se, where you couldn't get right up to the tree. You could in the Mariposa Grove, and they were still beautiful and huge. And so the kids were able to just fully explore. You were in a forest, essentially a valley. There's no steep drop offs or raging waterfalls to be wary of as a parent in terms of safety. And so even our 1 year old walked, and it was the absolute cutest just seeing his face light up and him kind of like run down these little trails and go up to the big trees. He was fascinated by the different indents they got in that were called fire scars because they do controlled burns in these areas to burn up the brush underneath to essentially like clear that out so that these big trees can keep growing versus their nutrients getting taken by all this brush underneath. So it was just very different than what we had seen the other 2.5 days in the other area of Yosemite National Park, and broke up our drive on the way out to Sequoia. When we got to Sequoia, we did the General Sherman tree and the Grant tree. So these were cool, huge trees, like very neat to see. But it was definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, I saw it. That was really cool, but I don't necessarily need to go back. Yosemite was amazing, and I would totally go back in a heartbeat. But again, we were there. I'm so glad that we did it. And to drive between the two, you went through all of these fruit groves, which was really neat. They were little fruit stands along the road. We didn't end up stopping at one because our 1 year old was napping and we're like, okay, he's sleeping. We're just going to keep going. But if you do this and you have the opportunity, it's literally fresh produce, which was so cool. And so I will say though, coming out of Sequoia, so we did Sequoia. This was a big day. We did a few hikes in Sequoia. Coming out of Sequoia, you had to wind out of the mountain. And to get to where we were staying, we just had one night in a hotel between there and our final stop on this trip, which was Monterey and Big Sur, like along Highway 1. I got sick on this drive. So it is winding, steep drop offs, and I had felt a little uneasy in my stomach going up to Glacier Point while in Yosemite because same thing. It was just a lot of sharp switchback turns. And I'm usually not one to get motion sickness, but when I am pregnant, I do get more sensitive to that. And we were driving along and it just hit me like so quick. I was like, I need to throw up. And so there was nowhere for my husband to pull off. It was literally steep drop off or cliff wall of a mountain, like literally a rock face. And I just rolled down the window and had to vomit out the side of the car. So again, like in the second trimester, whenever we had done our other big national park trips, that was never an issue. But first trimester, the body's a little bit more sensitive, and I threw up out of our moving vehicle, and that was not fun, but it was what I had to do in the moment. And then we had to stop for me to throw up again when we were going through the fruit groves on the way to our hotel because again, it hit me very fast. And that time you were able to pull over. So thankfully, those were the only times of nausea on the trip, and they were motion induced, but worth mentioning as a little side note there. So in Monterey, it was just so beautiful. This is on the coast now, the Monterey Peninsula. This is where you can get onto Highway 1, Big Sur, and take it down through Pebble Beach Golf Club. There is a very scenic drive. There are tons of state parks to pull off at, local beaches that are kind of hidden gems. that you have to hike down to from this rocky upper level. We're on like the side of the foothills of the mountain and then hike down to water level to the beach. Just absolutely beautiful. So we stayed in a place called Portola Hotel. Great location in Monterey, easily walkable to the beach, to the pier, and to the downtown restaurants, and then very easy to drive from there along Highway 1, Big Sur. There was an incredible park in Monterey called Dennis the Menace Park, and that was so fun for our kids. The drive along Big Sur again brought us to so many different outcrops, and that is actually where we told our kids that there was a baby in mommy's belly. So at this point we hadn't yet told them, and we told them at the beach, Pfeiffer Beach, and it was really cute. They all kissed my tummy, and those are the announcement pictures I ended up sharing over on Instagram and on my blog. But it was just a really special family moment and really focused more on rest and relaxation as compared to kind of the go, go, go nature of hiking that we had done in the national parks. And so when planning trips with kids, it's so good to implement these different categories of the trip and to front load the trip with the hiking, because when our kids started to be like, okay, I've had enough of the hiking, we were moving on and we were going to the beach and the pool, and they were so excited for the beach and they had that in mind all trip. That's our last stop, and they enjoyed each subset of the trip. But I would say the beach was probably their favorite. It was actually the coldest on the coast. It was mid 60s, so it wasn't great beach weather, but we went to the beach in their clothes and they played in the sand and absolutely just made their own fun. Ended up jumping over the waves, kind of splashing on the edge of the water. A lot of the water along Big Sur is way too strong of currents to even get in. So, at those beaches, they were totally fine just playing in the sand. And my husband and I just took it all in. It was beautiful. And just being in the moment with them, there is essentially no service, no cell reception as you're going along Big Sur and as you're in each of the national parks. So these type of trips for us are just such a neat way to unplug. You don't have that constant call of typical daily life and notifications coming your way. You're just with your family. And I think that's why we like these trips so much. There's just this great opportunity to unplug, to be in nature, to ground, to experience God's beauty and with the people that you love most without all of the distractions of as much commercialization or media and things like that. And so, that is why we've been choosing national parks for most of our recent trips. I do on my blog have a Utah Mighty 5 national park travel guide, and then a Banff and Jasper and Yoho national parks in the Canadian Rockies, a travel guide for that as well. And so I know many families have benefited from those guides. I will do the same thing for our Yosemite, Sequoia and Kings Landing, and Big Sur trip that I just covered today. And I hope it brings you value. I hope whether you're a parent with young kids currently who is seeking to travel more but feels scared, that this gives you the encouragement to do so. Or if you aren't yet a parent and you are afraid of losing this part of yourself that loves adventure and loves travel, I hope this is encouraging to you to know you can still do it. It looks different. It looks more flexible. It means choosing hikes that are appropriate for your kids, but they don't have to be easy. And I think that's something that when you look at a lot of mom blogs or when you Google, traveling Yosemite with kids, and the recommendations are just like flat paved trails. Like when I dropped it into Chat GPT to give me recommendations, it was like, this trail is paved so you can push a stroller. I'm like, that's not what we're doing. We didn't bring a stroller. We're using hiking backpacks. Like, we still want to hike, and we don't want it to be this commercialized experience of the park. And so to know you can still do that when you bring your kids, just as we did. You do your research ahead of time. You know what hikes are going to be more strenuous. And yes, I know this is not for everyone. I've had conversations with friends who are like, like my kids, no way. It is something our kids have learned, and it does help that we have been doing this for a few years. And so to the point of my daughter knows what to expect now. Now our 3-year-old knows what to expect. He did it this trip. So now next trip we will know, like, okay, he's good. We will do metro parks locally or state parks. Those kinds of things are all just little micro exposures for your kids, and then they learn. And They're so resilient, more than we give them credit for, I think, in today's society. And so each trip is just, so awe-inspiring of what a kid's little resilient body can do. And so just to kind of wrap this all up, you can grab the blog post in the show notes, but please reach out to me if you have any questions. I know that traveling with kids can feel intimidating, but it doesn't have to, okay? And we are always looking for that next adventure. So if you have somewhere that you have loved traveling with your kids, please reach out to me. You can DM me over on Instagram at Dr. Kayla Borchers. Give me ideas on where you've traveled with your family. We have a fourth one on the way. We were talking after our last trip. We're like, gosh, I don't know. Like, how is it going to be after the fourth one comes? I don't know. So if you have four kids especially, let me know how traveling goes for you because we will take all of your tips and tricks. And if you have questions at all, just DM me over on Dr. Kayla Borchers on Instagram. I love to chat all things travel and just living life with your kids instead of feeling like it has to be separate to meet this desire or this want of traveling. They can come with you. So thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please leave a quick review for the podcast. You just go to my main page, scroll to the bottom, click rate and review, give it 5 stars, leave your review on what you love the most from tuning in. It truly helps more women find this space and feel empowered in their womanhood journey as well. Thank you so much for being here.